Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. This is a series I'd actually planned to watch and review years ago, but when I sat down to see the first episode, I suddenly couldn't find it. As soon as I noticed it had reappeared on High Dive recently, it jumped to the top of my to-watch list. Beautiful Bones introduces us to a boy named Shotaro. He's a pretty ordinary high school kid, except for his apprenticeship of sorts with the town eccentric. Sakurako Kujo is the daughter of one of the wealthiest families in town. She's beautiful, but about as antisocial as they come, preferring to be left alone to her work as an osteologist. Mostly, she pieces together models of skeletons, like you'd see in a museum. She's recruited Shotaro to help her out on her foraging trips. The only problem? They have an uncanny record of stumbling across human remains while they're out digging for animal bones. This was the type of show that feels like it blends genres a bit. There's definitely a detective element to it, but Beautiful Bones isn't super strong on the murder mystery side of things. Or, I guess I wouldn't say the mysteries aren't strong, it's just that the mystery is rarely the true focus of the episode. Sakurako usually knows the truth of how the victim died as soon as she's gotten a chance to examine their body. At the end of the opening song, there's a short note that reads, "This story is dedicated to those who live trapped in the past," which is fitting, but it would have been equally fitting, maybe a little on the nose, to phrase it, "This story is dedicated to those who were left behind," because the true focus of these episodes are usually the victims' loved ones, and not the victims themselves, which gave this series a slower feel to it a lot of the time. Its tone was often more slice of life than murder mystery. That wouldn't normally be a point in its favor as far as I'm concerned, but as I've already had cause to mention this year, I love a good grief storyline. So I can honestly say I was never disappointed when this series took a softer approach. It's not the kind of show that can really shy away from showing the dead bodies, and some of these deaths are pretty brutal, so it actually felt pretty balanced overall. This series was dark, but not too depressing. There was also the slightest hint of a romance element. It's never exactly clear whether Shotaro's feelings for Sakurako are closer to extreme admiration or a childhood crush. I'm inclined to lean towards the first interpretation. I think some of the hero worship has remained from their early days, but at the point in the story that we're introduced to these two, they've grown into a very comfortable sort of partnership. Sakurako's got a childish side to rival her serious, professional one. So it's often Shotaro who has to be the responsible one, alerting the police to their discoveries before she can sneak the bones home. They also introduced one of Shotaro's classmates in the first episode, a girl named Kogami, who played a much bigger role than I'd anticipated. At first it seems like she's just going to be a love interest for Shotaro, but Kogami ends up getting involved in quite a few of their cases. And by the time the series is about halfway through, and some of her friends are teasing her about the crush they assume she has on Shotaro, it felt entirely believable when she tells them they're just friends. She's come to really admire Sakurako too, and whenever Kogami's trying to get in touch with Shotaro, it's usually to ask Sakurako's advice on something. Another development I really liked. And it wasn't just Kogami. One of the series' strongest points is its cast of recurring minor characters. Everyone who appears in more than a single episode has a certain charm to them. From Utsumi, the bumbling local police officer with a heart of gold, to Baya, the nanny who's taken care of Sakurako since she was a child, to Isozaki, the teacher who seems cold and selfish at first, but is secretly haunted by a past student's disappearance. Every single one of them grew on me. Recurring side characters are an element that can really tie together an episodic storyline, so I always love to see it. But the closer you get to the end, the more hints you're given that all these separate cases may be a part of one cohesive mystery after all. There are a couple big points. We learn as early as episode 3 that Sakurako had a younger brother who died under circumstances that are never revealed. As she got older, she grew really close with her uncle, who was a forensic expert who worked with the police, and she's recently started investigating one of his cold cases. She's all but solved it, in fact. They've come across several bodies that seem to have nothing in common, except for a specific bone missing from the skull of each one. We've even got a name for the grave robber. The final case centers on a group of girls he was grooming, manipulating their grief over a friend's death. But this review can't be complete without mentioning that this story is a little unfinished, which is definitely frustrating because it feels like we were so close to the end. But we're never given the full tale of Sakurako's brother, and it's never confirmed whether his death had anything to do with this final suspect, who's not apprehended by the end of episode 12. What's most frustrating about that is that most of the final episode is spent on flashbacks showing how Shotaro and Sakurako's partnership first came to be. I wouldn't ordinarily consider that sort of thing to be a waste of time, but I have to admit that I'd forgotten that we never got a proper backstory for these two. At this point in the story, it definitely didn't feel important enough to eat up what little time we had left to get the story to a proper conclusion. Which leaves me a little torn. There's the blemish of an incomplete tale that feels like it definitely did have the time to reach a more satisfying end, if that time had been handled a little differently. I also have to admit that I could understand why this one may not stand out as anyone's favorite detective story. Like I said, the more exciting murder mystery aspect of each episode tends to take a bit of a back seat. It's not rushed exactly, but they do tend to be summed up pretty briefly. That said, I still enjoyed this one quite a lot. The characters were a real high point for me, and I've really come to appreciate a series where it feels like I'm learning something. There's no doubt in my mind that this tale came from its creator's own passion for forensic science, so if you're looking for something a little different, I'd recommend checking this one out. Thank you for watching.